Our story today begins as many do, with a young woman named Natsuko Hirose putting pen to paper. Oh yeah, no, I meant literally. Natsuko here got hired at an anime studio straight out of high school, and from there she worked hard, became an animation director, did storyboards, and became an episode director. While giving us a look at her first hit anime, Natsuko explains that her next project's an original rom-com film called Hatsukoi. The only problem? She might be functional, but she's a total NEET at heart, which means she can't write romance to save her life. Something that's pretty apparent when her supervisor comes over to check on her golden goose and sees she hasn't even gotten started. Luckily, the old cougar's really chill and tells Natsuko she has faith in her before leaving. But first, she hands off a whole bunch of expired bento boxes to another employee to dispose of. I'm totally sure that won't be important later. Back in the break room, a conversation between two of her coworkers reveals the haggard appearance she's got right now is self-imposed, and she'll only allow herself to fix her hair once she gets her project done. On top of that pressure, Natsuko also keeps on taking the workload of other tasks, not wanting to compromise and settle for the lesser quality of others. And so, with her health neglected, her stress at an all-time high, and the sudden news that a role model of hers in anime directing has passed away, she ended up grabbing one of those expired bento and sitting down to watch a movie from said director. It's one she's watched more times than she can count, and is known for being famously depressing. Not only does the protagonist, Luke Braveheart, lose his closest friends, but he's also faced with one soul-crushing challenge after another. Right as Natsuko's thirsting over Luke's 2D dimensions like the true weeb she is, the expired food she's been shoveling down finally catches up to her already weakened body, and the girl collapses to the floor. Even as her boss rushes over to help her, Natsuko's already about to shove off the mortal coil, her hand tightly gripping onto her drawing tool, and then darkness. For like 2 seconds. Now she's in a desert after seeing her life so far flash before her eyes real quick. Talk about anticlimactic. Right as the animator's coughing up the mouthful of sand she's landed in, though, a massive sandbug monster shows up and tries to eat her. I take it back, this is pretty climactic. Just as Natsuko finds herself unable to run any further and prepares to be eaten, something wholly unexpected happens. A literal knight in shining armor shows up to save her, supported by an elf-eared archer and a magical wielding stuffed toy. Why am I even questioning this? Anime's always weird. Between the archer's arrows, the stuffed toy's magic, and the knight's flashy swordsmanship, the monster's taken down quickly, quite literally imploding into a mini black hole. Because screw physics. Of course, all this makes it quite evident that Natsuko has been ISEKAI'D, especially when the knight, called Luke by his friends, scolds her for putting herself in danger. Unfortunately, Natsuko's in denial, believing Luke and his friends to just be really creative cosplayers. Holy mother of copium, that's her reach. Quickly growing tired of the weird stuff Natsuko keeps saying, Luke and his party give her a warning to get to town as fast as she can before heading into the skies themselves. Because the stuffed toy can turn into a flying horse. Yeah, because why not at this point? Even after reaching the town they told her about and seeing literal beast folk walking around, Natsuko keeps trying to rationalize what she's seeing, but when she spots Luke's party and recognizes a whole ton of event markers from a very familiar piece of media, even she is forced to face reality. Or, well, non-reality. God, I don't get how this works. As far as she can tell, she's been transported straight into the world of A Tale of Perishing, the film that's always fascinating her so much. Quickly rushing over to where Luke and his friends are being treated as the guests of honor for a feast, Natsuko proceeds to make a total ass of herself. I mean, really, she straight up starts yapping about isekai rules and how there's no way she could have gone through that since she was a totally upstanding member of society. Yeah, and I'm Santa Claus. Meanwhile, Luke and his companions continue to mistake Natsuko for a gremlin thanks to the hair situation she's got going on, which really doesn't help her image right now. When Natsuko suddenly remembers the catastrophe that occurs after this feast in the original film and tries to warn them, Luke's party finally decides she's a nutcase, and they have her dragged away by security. Of course, her using the stuffed toy Unio as a stress toy doesn't exactly help her case. By the time night falls, Natsuko's still stuck around as close as she can, staring at the hero's food like a starving peasant, which is kinda exactly what she is here. Even as she experiences disappointment in Luke's pettiness and Unio's cocky attitude though, Natsuko feels that need to warn them about the events of the film. Luke and his friends will defeat the Void Army that's coming their way, but Unio will die in the process, leaving the hero with crippling depression. Damn, he'll be just like me! Sure enough, almost like a prophecy playing out in real time, the town's alarms start going off as the Void Army is spotted marching their way. As Luke and Cole go rushing to protect the town, Natsuko quietly sneaks onto the main walls to watch. Despite wanting to do something, Natsuko knows this is just how this story goes and reminds herself there's nothing she can do. But with each passing moment, as she sees the scenes of the film playing out before her actual eyes, Natsuko's anxiety grows more and more. As she expected, Luke is quickly overwhelmed by the enemy's numbers, which means the tragedy is going to occur now. Unseen by Natsuko, however, something in her pocket is glowing brighter and brighter as her emotions grow more desperate. And then, right after she screams out for them to run, the glowing peg bar speaks to her, and it tells her she must draw. In the meantime, Unio has trapped Luke and their archer friend in shield bubbles, planning to save them by taking out the Void Army with a self-destruct spell. Bro's trying to pull a Vegeta! Vegeta, no! Just as Unio moves out of their range though, Natsuko suddenly bolts onto the scene, running like a woman possessed. Usain Bolt would be proud if he saw this, or he'd die of embarrassment. Could go either way. Anyway, now that she's on the battlefield, Natsuko gets into an argument with her peg bar. Real classy. Meanwhile, Unio has started the casting sequence for the self-destruct spell she plans to use, almost as if she's responding directly to Luke's desperate cries over the situation. Natsuko finally listens to her peg bar and manages to unleash a power completely unique to herself. In a stunning visual display, she summons forth her cubicle from work, allowing her to draw at inhumane speeds like the peg bar told her to. This just looks like me the night before a homework deadline. Sure enough, in a record time of 42 seconds, Natsuko finishes her drawing, which proceeds to come to life right before everyone's eyes. This creation summoned forth by Natsuko's unique power is an utter monstrosity, formed by the combination of several anime ideas. But right now, Natsuko doesn't have the time to focus on the beast's appearance. With seconds left before Unio sacrifices herself, Natsuko has the beast unleash a literal nuke on the Void Army, wiping them all out and knocking Unio out of her spell casting. In the aftermath of the army's destruction, Luke approaches Natsuko, whose hair is now finally out of her face. A fact which shocks Luke into silence when he gets a proper look at her for the first time. Unfortunately, right in the middle of answering his questions about who she is, Natsuko collapses from exhaustion, leaving the knight to catch her mid-fall. Though he has more questions than answers, he knows now who to thank for saving his friend's life. Natsuko Hirose, of the kingdom known as Reality, and above all, an animator. We pick up from where we left last time, where Natsuko collapsed from exhaustion after using her new powers for the first time. The next chapter of the story kicks off with a short expositional sequence about a tale of perishing's world building. Each of the 9 countries there have a sun-like thing called a soul future. While these upload the happy and flourishing lives of the people, the Void's monsters that appear one day aim to eat the soul futures. If they eat all 9, the great void that brings the end of the world will appear. Man, never thought I'd enjoy a history lesson. The best warriors of the lands meant to stop this from happening are the 9 soldiers. And while all of them work hard, Luke is the one who crashes out tremendously from the losses he faces. As the exposition comes to a close, Natsuko's eyes begin to open, awakened from her 3-day-long slumber, only to find herself in a fancy and unfamiliar room. Rising from the bed, the girl's in the middle of checking out this room when Luke pulls up out of nowhere and starts bombarding her with questions about her origins and identity. Luckily for Natsuko, her stomach answers for her, and Luke has the decency to grill her up some food before grilling her any further. While Natsuko's eating, Luke is blown away by one thing after another. First by her expression of wonder when he pushes the hair out of her face, and then by just how much she knows about him thanks to having consumed the world's story so extensively in the real world. Brody most certainly thinks she's a creep. After Natsuko asks for seconds and thirds and fourths, man, she can really pack it in. The two get to the topic of her powers. A conversation which ultimately goes nowhere, though as Natsuko finds herself unable to activate the power at will. It does, however, land them in a pretty compromising position when Natsuko leaps at Luke for grabbing her peg bar away from her. Because even in another world, trope's got a trope. Just then, Unio walks in on them alongside Memerun and immediately calls Natsuko a gremlin, which leads to the girl giving the talking horse an earful for a bunch of stuff she can't even begin to understand. Seriously, why rant about how much you spent on merch when you spent it? Friggin' turbo weeb. Before the one-sided argument can go any further, though, the group are informed by QJ that the mayor wants to see them, including Natsuko. Being the completely socially inept weirdo with no filler for her intrusive thoughts that she is, Natsuko proceeds to geek out over the mayor's physique as soon as they get to his place. To be fair, look at the dude. And that's only the beginning, as the next person she treats like a zoo animal is the prophet Baobab, utterly scandalizing Luke's party. Baobab herself, on the other hand, is fairly amused. As they get to the reason for this meeting, namely Natsuko's origins, the animator proceeds to infodump like all hell about how this world is just a fictional tale drawn by animators and brought to life by an anime director. Yep, that'll definitely go over well. Sure enough, it all pretty much goes over their heads. But Baobab just chalks it up to the weirdness that comes with the soul futures of their world being eaten. With only one left, weird stuff's been happening all over the place, and their goal now is to protect the final soul future. To that end, she recommends that Natsuko be recruited into the 9 soldiers. That's when Luke shows his true colors, exposing the deep-rooted, if unmalicious misogyny of his character, claiming that a woman can't be an effective soldier. When called out for having no issues with Memerun, he just gives some lame excuse and tries to move on. But instead, everyone else moves on from his nonsense. More importantly, Natsuko drops a hint about void monsters capable of flying that'll show up soon, and then refuses to elaborate out of pettiness towards Luke. After the meeting, Natsuko rushes out to the desert where she first spawned in this world and desperately begs God to reverse her isekai. I'll let you guess how well that goes. Spoiler, not very. Later that evening, cold and alone in the rain, Natsuko finds herself hungry enough to forgo her pride and return to where Luke's party was. After jump-scaring the life out of Luke and Unio with her haggard appearance, she proceeds to trade them info on the next voids to appear in exchange for food. With her previous info being correct, her extensive knowledge on Luke and her drawing skills helping to make her words more tangible, the hero of the story is convinced she's telling the truth. 3 days from now, the Flying Voids show up at the Harvest Festival aboard a mothership and destroy most of the crops, leaving the last city to starve. When questioned about her motivation here, Natsuko explains that as long as she is stuck here without a way back home, there's something she has to protect. And not wanting to admit that something is Luke's spirit, she claims it's food, and proceeds to make that one of her core character traits. Sis thinks she's a Saiyan! With that, she declares her plan to accept recruitment into the 9 soldiers simply for the free food and drink at the local tavern that's granted to them. Fair enough, honestly. At said tavern, Natsuko's in the middle of enjoying the local cuisine when she realizes the matron, Naomi, is based on her in-real-life boss since she was a producer on A Tale of Perishing. Small world, I guess. As she thinks about her life back in the real world, Natsuko wonders for the first time if she really wants to go back. About 3 days from then, Natsuko's prediction comes true, and the Flying Void's mothership appears outside the city. Ready for it thanks to her warning, Luke rushes to the city outskirts, forcibly dragging Natsuko alongside him in hopes that she can use her power again. Luckily enough, Natsuko's performance issues subside as soon as Luke leaps into the wholly suicidal battle against the Flying Voids. Not so lucky, however, is Natsuko's peg bar, informing her that she can't draw anything she's already used for her power, so she has to come up with something completely new. Quite literally, scratching at her head, unable to come up with anything, Natsuko has to watch as everyone does their best to fight off the voids, though it's clear they won't last long. Just then, she suddenly has a eureka moment, knowing what she's going to draw and finally activating her power with that in mind. Following the visual treat that is her power activation sequence, Natsuko gets to work drawing her latest weapon at inhumane speeds. With Luke and the others just barely holding on, Natsuko finishes just in time to save them, summoning forth dozens, if not hundreds, of heat-seeking missiles leap out from her canvas. In a display of the superior destructive power of the modern era, Natsuko's creation makes quick work of the Void Army, bringing it to ruin in mere moments and saving the city. Unfortunately for her, that means yet another collapse from exhaustion, and another time being caught in the arms of Luke. Okay, maybe that part ain't too bad. 3 days later, Natsuko awakens and realizes her power knocks her out for the same amount of time she'd normally take to draw the stuff she brings to life. At the same time, not noticing how intently Luke is observing her with the hair properly out of her hair for once, Natsuko munches down on more of his food. The void monsters may be a great threat, but for now, the warmth of the meal and each other's company is all that really matters. Now, after Natsuko's actions saved the last city in the world of A Tale of Perishing, she's been knighted as one of the 9 soldiers. Or is it 10 now? In any case, thanks to Natsuko's heroic acts, the city is now able to celebrate its harvest festival freely, unlike in the original story where the flying voids ruined everything. It's at this festival that we see Natsuko for the first time in some actual proper clothes, a fact that Unio is quick to point out as her usual rudeness kicks in. As Natsuko returns fire, the two end up in one of their usual fights, while the townspeople watch in fascination. They act like they've never seen a chibi unicorn beefing with a gremlin before. As the festival goes on, Natsuko thinks back to how in the original story, this was actually a joint funeral for Unio and everyone else who died in the void attack. Now though, she has to stand in this uncomfortably fancy dress while the high priest performs a ritual to celebrate the soul future. After that, Natsuko's overjoyed at the sight of more food than she can even begin to list. As Unio and her rush over to the feast though, Luke's buzzkill ass shows up and starts lecturing them about how they need to take this seriously and be on guard. Annoyed, Natsuko tries to tell him that it's fine for them to relax since the next attack is supposed to be on a rainy day. And according to QJ, the next one of those won't be until at least next month. Yeah, because the tin can's predictions have been so useful before now. With Unio actually backing Natsuko up for once, Luke is forced into backing off. And that has nothing to do with the crowd of babies that just came over to talk to him. Oh, not at all. While Luke deals with that, Unio spots some elf ladies coming their way. Instantly, the chibi transforms to its full unicorn form and starts looking for attention. I could have sworn this thing was a girl. Unfortunately for Unio, the elves walk right past with zero interest and instead go to speak to Memorun. At their invitation, the elf from Luke's party joins the two for the festival choir. By the time the sun's about to set, Natsuko's walking along the city walls with a tray of food and a pint of booze. Now that's the life. This is when she meets Elder Baobab. After offering her some of the food, Natsuko takes a seat with the old lady and they end up discussing the current situation. As they talk more, Baobab asks Natsuko if she has any knowledge of the future of the world. Seeing that this is only bringing up sadness and disappointment in Natsuko's eyes, it's enough of an answer for Baobab. Despite the unfortunate news, she smiles at Natsuko and tells her they can worry about all that later. Right now she should focus on enjoying the festival. As the old lady walks away, Natsuko suddenly hears a highly cheerful voice in the distance. More importantly, it's one she recognizes and is instantly annoyed by. Based on what she remembers of the movie, this is the night she shows up. Sure enough, on the walls, Luke suddenly finds himself bumped into by Holy Destiny. This is Destiny. Before Luke can even react to the sudden meeting, Destiny squeezes close to him and uses his cape to hide from... Whatever that is. The rich chairman dude. Unfortunately for her, the closeness between her and Luke's face is enough to embarrass her out of the hiding spot. Now that the guy's seen her, the girl runs off while wishing Luke a happy festival. As she watches the girl leave, Natsuko thinks back to her role in the movie. The sheltered daughter of the mayor, Destiny, an extremely oblivious girl whose cluelessness is the cause for most of the 9 soldiers' problems. Later, Luke meets the girl once again when he goes to meet the mayor in his tent. There, the mayor and Unio both take on the role of matchmaker, pushing the two together. As the two hit it off and dance together, Unio and Natsuko watch from their table. Being the annoying perv that annoying perv that it is, Unio mocks Natsuko and claims she's jealous of the girl, making her mad over the ridiculous lies. Besides, like Unio says, Natsuko knows that Luke's had the burden of being a hero since he was a child. In the movie, the one person in his life who could make him truly smile was Destiny. As the festival rages on, the sun sets, and unseen by anyone, a hooded figure performs a spell on a void in the middle of the city. Man, you ain't slick. We all see that hair, Memerun. Back at the mayor's tent, Natsuko and Unio are back in their normal clothes and still chowing down. Where does it even go? In the middle of this, Destiny comes in looking for Luke. After Natsuko brutally Beyblades Unio into a dartboard for being a douche, she suddenly finds herself being admired by Destiny. This is when the weirdo freak from earlier in the day shows up. As it turns out, he's the chairman of the company funding this town. Even worse, he's a total perv who already has 8 wives, and as the cherry on top, he's pressuring Destiny into becoming his 9th in exchange for building an orphanage for all the children of this town. As the man starts commenting on Destiny's appearance, Natsuko finally steps in and asks a question she's always had. Why does she choose to marry this weirdo pervert? Why not just build the orphanage herself since she's rich already? Between her words and how unashamedly Natsuko stands up to the moron of a chairman, Destiny is in awe of her new friend. All of this is quickly forgotten though when QJ shows up and reports that he can sense a void in the city. As they all quickly step outside, they realize that the high priest is standing next to an imposter of himself. While everyone else stands in confusion, Natsuko remembers how to recognize the fake. Out of nowhere, she pulls the wackiest dance moves known to mankind, and claims that only the real priest could copy that. For whatever reason, this works, and the imposter shows its true form as a void beast. As everyone runs from the creature, Unio turns to ask Luke for help. The only problem is, Luke's drunk off his gourd. And as Natsuko knows, this is because of Destiny giving him the strong stuff. True to Natsuko's thoughts about her being the cause of more of their troubles, Destiny finds herself stuck in the door of an empty building. And that's not all, because the Void Beast decides to crash that exact building, putting Destiny's life in danger. Desperate to save her, Luke rushes forward in his ridiculous state, only to get one-shotted like an NPC. With the hero down for the count, Natsuko hears her peg bar finally coming online again. While Unio gets done even dirtier than Luke, Natsuko activates her power. After the usual light show, Natsuko's hands blur across her canvas as she starts drawing. In the meantime, QJ manages to hold off the Void Beast, though it takes everything he has. Finally, as the robot goes pinballing across the room, Natsuko finishes. From her canvas, a professional wrestler Tiger Man leaps onto the scene. Several cat masks proceed to completely ruin the Void Beast in a show of wrestling better than anything you've ever seen in the WWE. Seriously, name one wrestler who can do all of this. At the same time, Natsuko passionately commentates on the fight while the others cheer their cat champion on. After dominating the beast for the whole fight, Serval Cat launches himself right into the monster's open jaw and crushes it from the inside. While everyone else celebrates the win, Serval Cat fades away and Natsuko collapses from exhaustion like usual. Reminded again of how hard she tries, Luke can only smile. 3 days later, after finally awakening from her routine coma, Natsuko gets to work chowing down on Luke's cooking. In the middle of that, Destiny enters the room and now clad in a whole new outfit inspired by Serval Cat. Serval Cat isn't the only one who inspired her though. She tells Natsuko that she took her advice and rejected that freaky chairman, and now she's building an orphanage herself. Just then, Unio and Memerun walk in. When Natsuko asks where Memerun was during the fight, Unio answers for her. The chibi gets all up in Natsuko's personal space and starts roasting her about not having friends to hang with like Memerun does. This time though, Destiny's there to defend her hero or friend and chops Unio a new one. While everyone else is laughing, Natsuko knows something they don't. For now though, she lets things play out and just gives Memerun a suspicious look. Following the narrowly avoided disaster of the Harvest Festival, we find a recovered Natsuko doodling some sketches of Memerun. On the other side of the table, Luke is prepping some food when he mentions that someone must have let in the void that night and used a transformation spell on it. Thanks, Sherlock. Never would have guessed. As Unia and Luke discuss the possibility of a traitor in town, though, Natsuko gets extremely jumpy and nervous since she knows who did it already. When she only gets more jumpy over Memerun walking out and suddenly leaves, Luke begins to have doubts. Out in town, gremlin mode Natsuko can then be seen trailing Memerun with cartoonish levels of stealth. Bro is fooling nobody. As she follows the elf, Natsuko thinks back to the events of A Tale of Perishing. Originally, after Luke saw through the disguised void, the ultimate void showed itself and was killed by the hero. Afterwards, however, the ultimate void was revealed to be Memerun under a transformation. Because reasons. Between her motivations never being revealed in the movie and there being no mention of the choir she's in, Natsuko wonders if something's different here. However, the train of thought is soon derailed by Luke suddenly appearing next to her, wondering just what she's doing. Definitely not being a creep, no sir. Seeing that Luke's about to out her, Natsuko quickly shuts the guy up by telling him everything she knows about Memerun's actions. Naturally, the knight finds her words hard to believe, but he accepts them and joins Natsuko in following Memerun. While discussing Memerun's time with the 9 soldiers, the dumbass detective duo follows her all the way to a cemetery. Here, hidden by an illusion wall, they find a path into a secret chamber. If the path itself wasn't creepy enough as it is, what they end up finding definitely is. There's no choir here like Memerun mentioned at all. Instead, it's some kind of doomsday cult singing about death and the end of everything and how much they hate the world. Man, who hurt y'all? Even more surprising, Memerun seems to be the head honcho of this whole thing, completely shocking Natsuko. After all, this was never shown in the movies, as Memerun and her cult start discussing how to call the ultimate void. Natsuko has to hold Luke back from barging down there and facing the elf directly. Quickly, the two head out of the cave of edginess and are spotted by Unio, who's looking for the choir. Because reasons. Nah, I'm kidding. He wants to hear them sing. Luckily, Natsuko manages to stop Luke before he blabs all about what they've seen to the little gossip machine of a unicorn. Together, the two manage to distract Unio from what they're doing here with a promise of ridiculous amounts of booze. That night, after getting Unio drunk enough to pass out, Natsuko and Luke sit in one of the gardens. Here, they get into an argument about which of them is going to handle the Memerun situation. Or at least it's supposed to be an argument. With the way they keep grabbing each other's faces and teasing each other, though, I'm pretty sure it's just flirting. Luke's a better man than me, cause I'd need a cold shower after this crap. By the end of their argument, Natsuko decides to let Luke try something first, purely out of curiosity and for funsies. And so we find Natsuko peeking in on Memerun and Luke the next day. Stealth is really not her thing, is it? As Natsuko listens in while munching on some of Luke's cake, pause! The hero starts trying to get info out of Memerun. He asks about the choir, about how happy she is, if she has issues with the 9 soldiers, and whatever else he can think of, only to get completely blank and empty replies. Unable to take any more of this bullcrap, Natsuko suddenly bursts into the room and point-blank asks Memerun why she wants to summon the ultimate void. Jesus Christ! Stunned by Natsuko's out-of-the-blue question, Memerun's left speechless at first. When Luke decides to go with the flow and ask her why she'd do this, the elf finally speaks. She talks about how after living as long as an elf does and seeing so many friends come and go, she just wants it all to end. She wants the ultimate void to wipe out the world and end all their suffering in a single go, so she doesn't have to lose her loved ones again. What in the Eldian euthanization plan did I just hear? Naturally, Natsuko calls out the selfishness of Memerun's goal and asks her if she really loves everyone in the 9 soldiers. Unable to answer such a question, the elf turns her back on the others and rushes out. Left alone, Natsuko turns to Luke to ask what they should do now, only to be met with a ridiculous sight. The dude's crying his butt off over how sad Memerun's situation is, and to top it all off, Unio walks in at that exact moment, making it look like Natsuko just made Luke cry. That night, Memerun walks through town, hearing the words of the people who are celebrating the 9 soldiers' efforts to protect them all. As she heads to her cult's latest meeting, the elf silently sings the depressing tune from their last session. Meanwhile, back at home, Luke presents his completely ridiculous plan to save Memerun. Using 3rd grade level drawings, he explains that Natsuko will create a fake ultimate void with her powers and have it command Memerun's cult to live on happily. Naturally, Natsuko bursts out in laughter at the stupidity. Still, though, she tells Luke it's worth a shot since it might solve things without hurting anyone. The next day, the two quietly sneak off during the day, giving Unio the completely wrong idea. After waiting at the cemetery for a while, they eventually spot Memerun and her cultists heading inside. After following them in, they prepare to start their plan. Wearing a disguise to blend in, Luke heads down to join the cultists while Natsuko draws the fake Ultimate Void. That way he can encourage the rest of them to obey her creation from inside their ranks. Unfortunately for him, Natsuko hears some cultists talking about how Memeruns finally decided to go through with their strongest ritual. Before Natsuko can fully piece together what's about to happen, things are already in motion. The cultists have started their ritual at Memerun's command, and the elf is front and center of the whole thing. Within moments, horns grow from her head and her form shifts, suddenly transforming into the Ultimate Void. Can't lie, underwhelming transformation. At this point, Natsuko's at a loss for what to do. If she calls for Luke to fight the Void, he'll end up with Memerun's blood on his hands, like in the movie. And yet, she can't go through with their plan to draw up a fake Ultimate Void now either, with the real thing right there. Luckily, her peg bar chooses this moment to finally come to life and call out to her. Though she struggles at first, Natsuko soon realizes the perfect thing to draw in this scenario. Something that'll make Memerun's heart skip a beat and give her the will to live again. And so, with the usual display, Natsuko gets to work. In the time it takes her to finish her work, Memerun surprisingly has a change of heart as well, thinking back to all the cherished moments she shared with Luke and their friends. Unable to go through with this, she drops her transformation right as Natsuko finishes her drawing. What happens from this point onward is best described as a fever dream of the best sort. A male idol, the ultimate existor, appears on Memerun's throne and transforms the cave into a gorgeous scene right out of Tokyo Ghoul's first opening song. Using the power of song and good looks, this man touches the hearts of everyone there. None more than Memerun herself, as the two share a dance across the night sky. Let's just hope Disney doesn't sue for this shot. By the end of the musical number, everyone is completely silent as Natsuko walks up to Memerun. Holding up her canvas, she tells the elf that even if she dies, this creation of hers will live on as long as the world is still there. An idea that truly reaches the elf's heart and brings her to tears while Natsuko collapses. With this, she's finally prepared to come home and live life to the fullest again. Days later, when Natsuko's recovered, she shares drawings of more male idols with Memerun. Characters from the first show she ever worked on, with Memerun happily stating that she has her whole life to fangirl over Sir Existor. The day is saved, funnily enough, by the power of simping. Speaking of which, a certain hero outside finds himself being teased over hanging out with Natsuko so much. It's almost like the two of them are dating. Of course, he's quick to shut that accusation down. After all, that could never happen, could it? Before moving any further with the story of a tale of perishing, we return to the day Natsuko was isekai'd, specifically how she's completely incapable of getting started on her rom-com project. Even after fully violating her coworkers' personal space to force some reference material out of them, she still can't imagine a good romance story. Meanwhile, some other employees in the break room talk about how their studio's going to go under if this project doesn't work out. So yeah, no pressure. Most importantly, when her supervisor tells her to split the workload with some others, Natsuko refuses and says it'll just be faster if she does everything herself. I know foreshadowing when I see it. She's totally getting cooked this episode. Welcome back to the present. We watch as Natsuko's creations take on a whole new wave of void monsters, while the Sailor Moon knockoff, Gurren Lagann robot, and baseball players completely wreck the monsters. Natsuko takes the chance to aura farm her butt off. Later, on the way home from their fight, Natsuko happily takes in the praise of the townspeople. Luke and Unio, on the other hand, are pretty put off. For completely different reasons, though. Luke's just kinda upset that Natsuko's doing all the fighting alone, but Unio just wants an excuse to mock her. Of course, it doesn't help that she was pulling out some great Saiyaman levels of cringe posing at the post-battle town assembly. While Unio's busy making fun of her, Luke can be seen in the kitchen shyly trying out some of Natsuko's moves. That's the scene Natsuko walks in on. Though luckily for Luke's dignity, she's too focused on the food to notice what he was doing. As Natsuko starts stuffing her face, Luke comes closer to brush her hair out of her face. Unseen by either of them, Unio's watching from the doorway with an evil aura surrounding him. He's convinced Luke's into Natsuko, and he'll be damned if he lets that ship sail. The next day, Natsuko and the gang head out to check out the orphanage Destiny's opened. There they meet the Holy Bazungas! She's a muscle mommy now? I guess Serval Cat Mask inspired her a lot more than anyone could have guessed. So much so that she's even named her orphanage after him, the Serval Cat House. As the group settles down to talk, Destiny explains that she's trying to get children from the slums to come to Serval Cat House, since they don't have anyone looking out for them. Most of them end up becoming criminals to survive, and feeding them is proof that they'll be treated well. When it comes to deciding who'll go to which slums, Unio refuses to go to the Despair District. However, when Destiny pairs up Luke and Natsuko to go there instead, he insists that he'll go after all. Definitely not just trying to third wheel them. As the three walk through this depressing district, Natsuko admits that she never knew a place like this existed in A Tale of Perishing. In response, Luke explains that the Soul Future's light doesn't reach these slums. When they're done fighting the voids, he hopes to improve the lives of the people living there. When Natsuko compliments him and says he's more mature than she expected, Luke's face lights up in a massive blush, almost as massive as Unio's annoyance. While Unio distracts the two with a glowing horse turd in the street, which he definitely didn't just make, a furry kid suddenly jumps out of the food cart they were carrying. Running past them, the kid pickpockets Natsuko's peg bar and makes a break for it. Luckily, Luke's one step ahead, quite literally, and catches the kid before she can escape. Instead of being afraid, though, the kid is amazed to see the famous hero of the 9 soldiers, a reveal which draws about a dozen more kids out of their hiding spot in the food cart. With the kids all staring at the hero and his friends in wonder, the pickpocketing's forgotten, and the adults decide to use this opportunity. Fast forward a little bit and we see Luke and Unio handing out food to the kids, making sure they all get some. Meanwhile, Natsuko's entertaining the little fellas with her drawing skills, drawing Unio's annoyance yet again. The unicorn can't exactly complain though, because before they know it, Natsuko's brought all the kids together with a combination of her drawings, ridiculous poses, and a rushed song about how great Serval Cat House is. Next thing they know, she's rushing off to the orphanage with all the kids chasing after her. Later in the day, after the trio have made several trips to and from the Despair District to find more kids, they come across a group of thugs bullying someone. Instantly, Luke goes to the person's defense and the thugs leave out of fear. With the thugs gone, Unio approaches the dragon man they were bullying and makes a big reveal. This alcoholic mess of a person is Justice, a former member of the 9 soldiers. Natsuko is shocked at what has become of the Justice she remembers in the movie, and the mood takes a sudden dip. Justice tries to play things off by flirting with Natsuko, but Luke just pushes him off and tells the others they should leave, refusing to even look at his old friend. That night, Natsuko watches Luke take out his anger on a training post. As she watches him, QJ explains that Luke looked up to Justice more than anyone. However, one day, he just quit the 9 soldiers out of nowhere and ended up as a bodyguard at an illegal gambling den. Curious about the holes in this story, Natsuko decides to see something for herself. The next day, Natsuko in the middle of another round of kid herding when she finds Justice. Grabbing the opportunity by the balls, she takes a seat next to the dragon. Almost instantly, she calls him out for his fake attitude and reveals the real reason why he quit the 9 soldiers. In the battle against the void that claimed the life of their friend Ganger, Justice was terribly injured as well. But in his grief over Ganger's condition, Luke didn't realize how badly Justice was hurt. Then one day, without any warning, Justice dropped out of the 9 heroes and took up a life of degeneracy. When Justice tries to deny Natsuko's claims, she sneaks a touch of his wings. Getting up in surprise, Justice reveals that she was completely right. Ever since that day, his wings have been too wrecked to fly anymore. With his secret reveal, Justice can only return the sad look Natsuko's now giving him. When she asks why he wouldn't just tell the others, Justice explains that if Luke knew, he would just blame himself for Justice's condition. If that's the only other option, he'd rather just let Luke hate him. With nothing more to say on that topic, Natsuko decides to switch things to a less depressing topic. From talking about hot springs to cockily saying she can handle all the voids anytime, to even drawing a sketch of Justice. What neither of them know is that Unio and Luke are watching from a distance, having been curious about where Natsuko's gone. The real kicker, though, is Unio insisting to Luke that Natsuko and Justice have a thing going on. After that, all the hero can think about is how jealous he is. Even back at Destiny's orphanage, he's busy being salty about how much Natsuko's talking about justice. That's all pushed to the side, though, when QJ suddenly reports an incoming void wave. Instantly, the gang rushes out to head towards the battlefield. Outside the orphanage, though, Natsuko suddenly hears a voice telling her that all her efforts will change nothing for this world. Unable to find where the voice came from, she ignores it and rushes to the battlefield. There, they spot a huge collection of what looks like eggs. When Natsuko admits that she never saw anything like this in the movie, Luke tells everyone to hang back while he and QJ go to scout the situation. In that moment, though, Natsuko's peg bar suddenly lights up and tells her to draw. Between the ego boost from her recent victories and her habit of taking everything on herself, the girl doesn't give it a second thought before walking out towards the eggs. In the usual magical display, she activates her powers and draws up what can only be described as a Ronin. At first, it seems like an instant victory after the Ronin slices up all the eggs. However, things quickly take a turn for the worse when all the liquid from the eggs comes to life. While Luke helps the Ronin fight off the goo, Memerun and Unio rush back towards the city to form a defensive line. At the same time, Natsuko goes into overtime to try and draw up some new moves for her Ronin. Unfortunately, it ends up being no use, as the goo tentacles destroy her Ronin in an attack straight out of a nightmare. With her champion destroyed and Luke too far away to help, Natsuko is now defenseless. Defenseless against the same tentacles that just killed her Ronin, rushing towards her to finish the job. Following up from the cliffhanger we left on last time, we now get thrown into a flashback. Get ready. In this flashback, we watch the incredible powers of justice and how well the full 9 soldiers worked together in the past. After a routine victory over the Voids, Luke and Justice share a fist bump, showing just how close they used to be. Back in the present, QJ provides a report on the latest and greatest Void that they find themselves up against. This Void, having a form similar to a slime, was able to completely ignore all their attacks and make its way to the Soul Future Tower. There, it has solidified and no attack has been able to break through its shell so far. According to QJ, the thing is likely a chrysalis, a cocoon that an evolved form of the Void will eventually crawl out of. Taking this all in, Natsuko comes to a decision. She's going to go out there and draw up something that can kill that thing dead, because that worked so well for her last time. Yeah, as Luke is pretty quick to point out, frustrated beyond belief, Natsuko damn near died in their last battle. If she keeps up this lone wolf overconfidence nonsense, it won't just be a close call next time. Storming out in frustration, Luke ends up at the graves of the other 9 soldiers. Here he sits in silence, hoping to feel a little closer to the friends he's lost. That's when Justice shows up, surprising Luke, since he didn't know the Dragon Brothers visiting this place. However, Justice has an image to maintain, even if that is a really crappy one. So as he sits there, he just asks Luke if he wants to drink, starts getting drunk himself, and comments how hard he's working. Hoping that there's still some good in his friend, Luke tries to ask Justice to help them with the latest Void, so they'll have more fighters that can fly. Yeah, about that, pal. Are you blind? How do you not see the whole-ass crispy fried dragon wing on his back? In any case, Justice refuses to help, pretending that it's purely because he doesn't want to fight. Rather than forcing the issue, Luke just ends up in an argument with Justice over how he'll never lose to the Voids. Even though Justice is trying to teach Luke that it's okay to not be perfect, the hero is too hurt to get it. Soon enough, the conversation switches over to the newest recruit, Natsuko, of course with recent events in mind. This just causes Luke to go on a huge rant about how frustrating she is. In the middle of this, with his feelings already pretty clearly on display, Luke tries to ask Justice about what Unio told him the other day. He tries to ask the dragon if he really has an adult relationship with Natsuko. However, the sheer embarrassment from the situation and his own fears of Natsuko being with someone else stop him from finishing his sentence. Instead, he decides to storm off again and take his anger out on the poor innocent Grass. Rest in pieces, Grass. You did nothing wrong.
Stop it.
At the same time, Natsuko can be seen at the inn, trying to sketch up ideas on how to fight this new void. This is the scene QJ enters on. Taking a seat next to her, the robot decides to show Natsuko footage of just what happened after their last fight. How hard everyone worked to make sure she made it through, and how worried for her they all were. As QJ leaves, his parting words remind Natsuko of a moment from her old life. One of her biggest flaws, in fact, acting like she alone is responsible for everything and can't rely on anyone else. And so the next day, Natsuko speaks to the others, telling them that she wants to hear their plan for beating this thing together. As the others respond with shock, Mamoru speaks up in Natsuko's defense. If it weren't for Natsuko, they'd have lost to the voids long ago already. But she needs the girl to know how anxious her fights always make her. The desperation with which she fights and makes such reckless choices terrifies her. For Natsuko, though, this statement just reminds her of the depressing story of a tale of perishing and how badly she wants to save it. As Mamoru closes in on Natsuko and lovingly tells her friend she wants her to survive, Natsuko finally shows a softer side. Blush bright on her face, she's actually calm and never mind. She's back to being laser-focused on drawing. At least it's just a drawing of Mamoru this time, because according to Natsuko, she's too cute not to save this face. Apparently, she's been drawing everyone's expressions that she hasn't already seen in the movie or its material. This, much to Luke's relief, explains what he saw the other day between her and Justice. Already riding that high, the hero's blush only gets brighter when Natsuko tells him she's made drawings of him more than anyone else. And then he ruins the moment by doing one of Natsuko's Saiyaman poses. Just wonderful! Out in the city, the civilians are being evacuated, and Elder Baobab is creating a barrier around the Soul Future. The preparations for the battle have begun. Back in their home, Natsuko and Cole discuss their strategy. Based on the footage they have of this void, its weak points look to be in its mouth. To make sure they take the thing down, their plan will be focused on getting it to open its mouth and binding it, allowing Luke and Natsuko to deliver the finishing blow. That evening, as the sun sets and the bell tolls, everyone knows one thing: the battle is about to begin. In his usual spot, Justice struggles with his choices and wonders what to do. Back with the main squad, Natsuko once again hears the mysterious voice, telling her that her efforts are pointless. Once again, though, she sees no one when she looks, so she just moves on. That night, everyone is in position when the void suddenly bursts out of its cocoon. Before anyone can react, Kyuji and Mamoru are blasted back and swallowed by the void whole. Just like that, their plan has been ruined already. Worse still, Unio's horn has been broken, which means he can't go into his unicorn form. Down below, Natsuko quickly recovers from her fall and gets to work on an improvised plan. Using her ability, she creates a staircase for Luke and Unio to climb and reach the void before it gets the Soul Future. Little by little, the two get closer, and Natsuko makes sure they have a path, even when the void tries to destroy it. Eventually, though, the two get too high for Natsuko to see, which means her creations can't reach them. Luckily, this is the moment Justice comes running onto the scene, unable to stay away any longer. Before he can even try to protest, Natsuko comes running and orders him to fly her up with her desk. Although he can't fly properly, Justice can still at least float them up to where they need to be. And seeing how hard Luke and Unia are fighting, there's no way he'll do less than his best to help. As Justice puts his head through Natsuko's desk and has her climb on, the kids from Destiny's orphanage are watching them. Altogether, they start cheering the dragon on. Their faith in the 9 soldiers stronger than any adults. As Justice struggles through his pain and injuries to get Natsuko where she needs to be, Luke and Unio finally realize the truth, watching from afar. Right now, though, they have more important matters to deal with. As Natsuko works overtime to create the rest of the path for them, Luke can only smile at the joint effort of his old friend and the girl he's beginning to have feelings for. Turning to the void, which has finally reached the Soul Future's barrier, Luke and Unia realize something. Kyuji and Mamoru are still alive in there, and they're signaling for them to launch the final blow. Wasting no time, Unio uses the little power he can access without his horn and kicks Luke hard enough to send him upwards. There, face to face with the void, Luke watches as Mamoru uses her magic to bind the monster from inside. Then, as she and Kyuji fly out of the thing, Luke tags in and launches his most powerful attack right at the void's weak point. In one massive slash of fire and energy, the battle is won, and the Soul Future is saved. As the sun rises on a new day, Luke walks up to Justice and offers a fist bump, like they used to do so long ago. In that moment, the anger between them is forgotten and their bond is restored. As Luke takes Natsuko's unconscious body from him and smiles down at her, though, Justice notes that an even stronger bond has been formed. A bond between the hero and the great warrior who's finally managed to open up his heart.